Hello, everybody. So, there are many books in theosophy which one reads, but sometimes when one comes across some very small books which explain some deep teachings and with much greater clarity. One such book is this book called Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge. So, way back in 1888, when the Secret Doctrine was published, at that time, Madame Blavatsky, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the author of the Secret Doctrine, and also the co-founder of the Theosophical Society, was at London. And at that time, a new group in Theosophy, these groups are called lodges. So a new lodge had been formed called the Blavatsky Lodge, and the students would meet with Blavatsky and ask questions. Now, this happened for 6 months in the year after that the magnum opus of Theosophy, the Secret Doctrine, was published. So from January of 1889 to June of 1889, these meetings took place, and the students asked many questions. Those questions were compiled into a book called The Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge. Now, those questions actually covered what are called the stanzas of Dhyan, which are texts of a very ancient nature, which the secret doctrine is based. Now, these stanzas of Dhyan connect to the origin of the universe and man's place in the universe. So, this explains so many things. Now, before beginning this book study, I want to just put a few disclaimers. There is a lot in this book which I could not really grasp. Maybe at some future date, I will be able to go back to the book. So, what I have done is I have taken a very small portion of the parts that I could understand and put them together so that people can at least go through some parts of this book. Very often, books like the Secret Doctrine, people don't even want to go through it because it is so tough to read. So, this particular book will make reading the Secret Doctrine easier and understanding concepts of theosophy easier. So, what I have done is I have taken uh, portions of this book and divided it into topics, and I'll be reading out parts of the book. So, the first topic that I'm taking up is consciousness. What is consciousness? So, the question asked here is it become it becomes the plane on which consciousness perceives objective manifestation. Is it so? Question being asked is it becomes the plane on which consciousness perceives objective manifestations. Is it so? Yes, but here we come face to face with the great problem of consciousness and shall have to fight materialism. For what is consciousness? According to modern science, it is a faculty of the mind like volition. We say so too, but add that while consciousness is not a thing per se, mind is distinctly, in its manavantrik function at least, an entity. Such is the opinion of all the Eastern idealists. So the next question is it is, however, the fashion nowadays to speak slightingly of the idea that the mind is an entity. Answer is, nevertheless, mind is a term perfectly synonymous with soul. Those who deny the existence of the latter will, of course, contend that there is no such thing as consciousness apart from the brain, and at death, consciousness ceases. Occultists, on the contrary, affirm that consciousness exists after death and that then only the real consciousness and freedom of the ego commences when it is no longer impeded by terrestrial matter. Now, here in this answer, she gives a little more information on what happens to the consciousness after death. So we know in theosophy that the soul goes to a space after passing some time in Kamaloka. It goes to a space called heaven or Devachan, And that is what she will be talking about now. So she says, this consciousness is finite, having a beginning and an end. But where is the word for such finite consciousness, which still, owing to Maya, believes itself infinite? Not even the Devachani is conscious of time. All is present in Devachan. There is no past, otherwise, the ego would recall and regret it. No future, or it would desire to have it. Seeing, therefore, that Devachan is a state of bliss in which everything is present, the Devachani is said to have no conception or idea of time. Everything is to him as in a vivid dream, a reality. So here she gives you a hint about what the state of death, post death is in heaven or Devachan, where there is no past, there is no future, but you are living in a ideal present where everything that you think will give you happiness is there, and it has no time. There is no time in that space, and you're living a kind of ideal dream in that space. So it is a great rest for this consciousness which is experiencing, because it is has absolutely no trouble. Now she describes what an ant's consciousness would be like. Now, in relation to its own plane of conception and perception, the ant has as good an intellect as we have ourselves, and a better one. For though it cannot express it in words, yet over and above instinct, the ant shows very high reasoning powers, as all of us know. Thus, finding on our own plane, if we credit the teachings of occultism, so many and such varied states of consciousness and intelligence, they have no right to take into consideration and account only our human consciousness, as though no other existed outside of it. And if we cannot presume to decide how far insect consciousness goes, how can we limit consciousness of which science knows nothing to this plane? So she says that even the ant has a consciousness. It is intelligent, it knows what it wants. So, how can we say that we are the only ones who are conscious? The question asked is, the ant's consciousness conception of time and space are not our own then. Is this what that you mean? Answer is precisely. The ant has conceptions of time and space which are its own, not ours. Conceptions which are entirely on another plane. We have therefore no right to deny a priori the existence of other planes, only because we can form no idea of them, but which exist nevertheless, planes higher and lower than our own by many degrees, as witness the ant. Occultism, unlike modern science, maintains that every atom of matter, when once differentiated, becomes endowed with its own kind of consciousness. Every cell in the human body, as in every animal, is endowed with its own peculiar discrimination and instinct, and speaking relatively with intelligence. Question: can there be consciousness without mind? Answer: not on this plane of matter. But why not on some other and higher plane? Once we postulate a universal mind, both the brain and the mind's vehicle and consciousness, its faculty, must be quite different on a higher plane from what they are here. They are nearer to the absolute all and must therefore be represented by a substance infinitely more homogeneous and something sui generis and entirely beyond the reach of our intellectual perceptions. Let us recall or imagine it is an incipient and incognizable state of primeval differentiation. On that higher plane, as it seems to me, Mahat, the great Manavantric principle of intelligence, acts as a brain, though through which the universal and eternal mind, radiates the Ahi, representing the resultant consciousness or ideation. As the shadow of this primordial triangle falls lower and lower through the descending planes, it becomes every stage more material. So here she says, of course, the mind that we know as mind gives us consciousness at this plane. But at higher planes, the mind may not be there. It could be other things, like, for example, the Mahat or the principle of intelligence acts as a brain, and the eternal mind, which is that absolute, the immutable absolute Parabrahman, that might have an idea which is expressed through this uh, universal mind. And that idea is, or ideation, ideas, lots of ideas, is the consciousness that is being expressed. So we cannot see in higher planes what consciousness is like. Now she goes to explain the consciousness of plants, so that we see every plant has an intelligence or its own purpose of life, so to speak, and its own free will to a degree. This is how, at any rate, I understand it. A plant can be receptive or non receptive, though every plant, without an exception, feels and has a consciousness of its own. But beside the latter, every plant, from the gigantic tree down to the minutest fern or blade of grass, has, occultism teaches us, an elemental entity, of which it is the outer clothing on this plane. So there is a lot of talk about elementals in theosophy, and these are kind of nature spirits. So there are nature spirits of air, nature which are called sylphs, nature spirits of fire called salamanders, and nature spirits of earth called gnomes. So these nature, and there is nature spirits of water. So all of these things exist in uh, nature. And here she says that every single plant, in every smallest little plant, has got a small elemental attached to it, a being, a nature being, which is attached to it. And it's like the soul of that plant. Like we have an inner soul, the plant also has this inner soul, which is its elemental. It's such a beautiful explanation. And the fact that plants are also conscious is something mankind has been experimenting it with for a long time now, in the last 100-120 years. So let's go further. Man, the perfected animal. What does she say on this? The question is, the difference between the animal and man from this point of view seems to be that the former is born more or less with all its faculties, and generally speaking does not appreciably gain on this, while the latter, that is, former is animal, the latter is man, while the latter is gradually learning and improving. Is not that really the point? That is, the former animal is already fully grown and it's not learning and improving. That is true, because however elephants have been now, they are the same they were a million years ago. They are not learning and changing. We don't find elephants suddenly reading newspapers. So that has not happened. They remain the same. Their their behavior may change a little as per the surroundings, but their intelligence has not multiplied like that. But we as humans, you can see that from native African or native any country's native population, when they are still doing lots of rituals, or they still have lots of superstitions. Our minds have developed into a scientific thinking. Our minds have gone far ahead. We are able to do a lot more with ourselves. So we have developed and improved our faculties. Our faculties have really improved of understanding the universe, understanding life. So man has been improving, evolving in all these hundreds of years, but not animals. So this is what he's the question he's asking: is he the animal has fully developed with all its faculties, but man is still gradually learning and improving? So the answer is Just so, but you have to remember why. Why is this? Why are animals not evolving? Not because man has one principle more than the tiniest insect. By principle here, Theosophy says that there are seven principles or seven bodies that we all have. The physical body is one, then there is the Linga Sharira, which is our etheric body. And then we have our astral body, which is our emotional body, then our lower mental, then our higher mental body, then we have our buddhic body and our soul or Atma. So there are seven principles that we all have. So she says it's not because man has one more extra principle. That extra principle, for example, could be the Buddhic principle as compared to an insect which does not have any Buddhic principle, but because man is a perfected animal. Man is a perfected animal, the vehicle of a fully developed monad, self conscious and deliberately following its own line of progress. Whereas in the insect and even the higher animal, the higher triad of principles is absolutely dominant. So, in theosophy, what is said is we all have a triad, which is our higher self. It consists of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. These three things form what is called the monad. The monad is what goes from birth to birth to birth. And each time we form a lower quaternary, which is made up of our lower mind, our emotional body, astral body, our linga sharira, and our physical body. So the lower quaternary is what we are always aware of. Our minds is actually our lower minds, because there is a huge difference between the lower mind and the higher mind. In Theosophy, in the other texts, it says that the higher mind is like a Buddha compared to the lower mind, which is a savage. That is how perfected the higher mind is. And every time, in every birth, it takes up a new form and tries to develop this higher mind, takes the best from every birth and develops this qualities of this higher mind in every birth. So it is like the concentrated goodness which is there possible in a mind, which is that from all our births is that higher mind. So what she says is that we have this Atma Buddhi Manas, this triad or this thing called monad, whereas this aspect is completely dormant in a animal. And that is the reason why they are not developing further. Without this triad, we also would have been the same. And we are all perfected animals. So here we have completed this part of it. The parts where we talked about consciousness, we talked about plants, we talked about animals. Now let's go to another core theme of philosophy, which is what is the absolute life. She says the absolute cannot be said to have a consciousness, or at any rate, a consciousness such as we have. It is neither consciousness, nor desire, nor wish, nor thought, because it is absolute thought, absolute desire, absolute consciousness, and absolute all. So, that thing which we call absolute is not a being over there which is conscious or has desires or has wishes. It is the, it itself is the source of every consciousness, every desire, every wish, every thought, because that is what it is. That's where what she's trying to say about the absolute. Then the question here is, does this mean that the three logi emanated from the primordial radiation in macrocosm correspond to the Atma Buddhi Manas in the microcosm? Just so. So in this book, you will find a lot of details on how the cosmogenesis took place, how the absolute one became two, and then three, and then seven. And in that process, this the three logi that is formed, uh, is formed. And here the question is: does that three logi, or logos? It comes from the word logos. The three logi are three logos, three different logos. They are, do they correspond to what I was just mentioning about the monad, that is Atma Buddhi Manas in the microcosm? She says yes, that is true. Now, this may not make too much sense to people who don't read theosophy, but this is something that we know, that man is represents the universe at large. That is how it is. The universe itself has got these three higher self and this four quaternary. Exactly the same sevenfold nature is there in humans also. Now, we know what are, we discussed this in Theosophy, Manavantras. So we will look at that in a bit later. I will come back to that slide later. Let's go on to the dream state. The fundamental conditions of the mind in the waking state are space and time. Do these exist for the mind during the sleep of the physical body? That is, the question is, during when we sleep, are we aware of space and time? So the answer is not as we know them. Moreover, the answer depends on which manas you mean, the higher or the lower. It is only the latter, that is the lower, which is susceptible of hallucinations about space and time. For instance, a man in the dreaming state may live in a few seconds the events of a lifetime. For the perceptions and apprehensions of the higher ego, there is neither space nor time. So here, actually, in this book, she discusses a lot about dreams, and she says that dreams are not necessarily just the remnants of whatever happened during the day, a mix-up and a new story. That most of us sense dreams appear to be just a kind of mix-up of all that happened during the day, what we read, what we thought, and new kind of stories coming up in our mind in dreams. She says that is the dreams of the lower mind, the hallucinations of the lower mind. But in when the consciousness moves to the higher mind in our sleep state, which is called the deep sleep. Remember in Yoga Sutra, we told about the consciousness as being in four states. So one is the awake state, second is the sleep state, third is the deep sleep state, and fourth is the Turiya state, which is the highest state, which is the state in which we are aware of our higher self. But this third state, the deep sleep state, is the state in which we are functioning in our higher self. And that the activities of those that higher self then, which actually does actual things, real things in that in the move in its movement, it moves to higher planes, it does activities, it learns things, it is growing in its own way. But we in our lower mind will rarely come to know what it is doing, and we get some sort of glimpses, some small images in our mind sometimes about what has happened, and that we think is as a dream, but that might have been the real activity of uh, the the higher self. So this is something she discusses in detail in this book. Now we go to another theme of this book, Maya. Maya is the perceptive faculty of every ego, which considers itself a separate unit from and independent of the one infinite and eternal Sat or beingness. Maya is explained in exoteric philosophy and the Puranas as the personified active will of the creative God, the latter being but a personified Maya himself, a passing deception of the senses of man, who began anthropomorphizing pure abstraction from the beginning of his speculations. So, what she's saying here is Maya is the perceptive faculty of every ego, which considers itself a unit separate from and independent of the one infinite and eternal Sat or Venus. The very fact that we think we are separate from this one infinite eternal para Brahman, which in theosophy is not a being but Venus itself, that is the quality of being, that we are separate from it, that itself is Maya. And then we think that we have a will of our own, which is coming from some creative God. Now, that creative God itself is our own imagination, it is our Maya, because we have been anthropomorphizing. That is, we are making a God out of some entity in our mind from the beginning of life itself. Maya in the conception of an orthodox Hindu is quite different from the Maya of a Vedantin, idealist, or an occultist. The Vedanta states that Maya, or the deceptive influence of illusion alone constitutes belief in the eternal existence of matter or anything differentiated. The Bhagavata Puran identifies Maya with Prakriti, manifested nature and matter. So each of these things are, whether it is the Hinduism or Vedantism or Theosophy, what we think of as Maya are different, but they're all different kinds of illusions and different kinds of beliefs in this. Now, altogether, no two people can see things and objects in exactly the same way, and that each of us sees them in his own way. Yet all labor more or less under illusions, and chiefly under the great illusion or Maya that they are, as personalities, distinct beings from other beings, and that even their selves or egos will prevail in the eternity or sem sempiternity at any rate. Sempiternity means periods where there is renewal, pralaya and manavantra. Even in this kind of a partial eternity of a manavantra, we will be the same consciousness will we are separate from this whole thing. That separation. Whereas not only we ourselves, but the whole universe and invisible universe are only a temporary part of the one beginningless and endless whole, or that which ever was and is and will be. So we are all part of that endless whole. We don't realize it. We think of it as being separate entities, and that is our greatest Maya. Now, I'm giving you here an example of one of the slokas which is there in the Secret Doctrine. And you can see how tough it is to understand it because it is all very allegorical. The Shloka 4 says, the seven ways to bliss, moksha or nirvana, were not. The great causes of misery, nidana and maya, were not. For there was no one to produce and get ensnared by them. So this is a time before the birth of the universe. And he says, it says that neither moksha, nirvana, nor nidana. Nidana means the causation, karma, what causes the chain of causation is nidana and maya. None of these were there because there was no one to produce all these kinds of concepts and get ensnared by them. So the question is, are nidana and maya the great causes of misery, aspects of the absolute? Answer: nidana means the concatenation of cause and effect. The 12 Nidanas, this is said by the Buddha, the 12 Nidanas, his famous teaching. The 12 Nidanas are the enumeration of the chief causes which produce the severest reaction or effects under the karmic law. Although there is no connection between the terms Nidana and Maya in themselves, Maya being simply illusion, yet if we consider the universe as Maya or illusion, then certainly the Nidanas as being moral agents in the universe are included in Maya. It is Maya, illusion or ignorance, which awakens Nidanas, and the cause or causes have been produced. The effects which follow according to karmic law. To take an instance, we all regard ourselves as units, although essentially we are one indivisible unit, drops in the ocean of being, not to be distinguished from other drops. Having then produced this cause of feeling that we are separate from everybody, having then produced this cause, the whole discord of life follows immediately as an effect. In reality, it is the endeavor of nature to restore harmony and maintain equilibrium. It is the sense of separateness which is the root of all evil. So, when we produce this cause of feeling separate, acting separate, thinking separate from all of humanity, we develop a cause for future pain. And it is nature's way of developing harmony and maintaining equilibrium that karma comes to us. That one thing itself, from the beginning, when we are trying to establish our personality and who we are, that itself is the cause of disturbance in the universe. This sense of separateness, then she says, it is the sense of separateness which is the root of all evil. Great teaching this is. Then, about the Maya and the Absolute. Question. Perhaps it would therefore be better to separate the two terms and state whether Maya is an aspect of the Absolute. Answer. This can hardly be so, since Maya is the cause and at the same time an aspect of differentiation, if of anything. Moreover, the Absolute can never be differentiated. Maya is a manifestation. The Absolute can have no manifestation, but only a reflection, a shadow which is radiated periodically from it, but not by it. This is the great teaching in Theosophy, that Absolute does not emanate something from it. In fact, the whole universe is a shadow of the Absolute. And that shadow is generated from the Absolute. It is not a shadow like we think of a shadow, but it is the shadow is generated by this Absolute, but it does not differentiate by itself. And this reminds us of what the Krishna said, that after I created the universe, I still stand separate from it. So it's truly that. Where is Maya? Maya is everywhere and in everything that has a beginning and an end. Therefore, everything is an aspect of that which is eternal. So anything which has a beginning and an end is Maya. Everything that is an aspect of that which is eternal. Only the eternal is not Maya. Everything else which has a beginning and end is Maya. And in that sense, of course, Maya itself is an aspect of Sat, or that which is eternally present in the universe, whether during Manavantra or Mahapralaya. Only remember that it has been said of even Nirvana that it is only Maya when compared with the Absolute. So when we think of moksha or Nirvana or coming out of the cycle of life and death, that itself is a Maya, because even that is temporary. Everything is temporary except the Absolute. Now, there is an interesting discussion on the difference between the cerebrum and cerebellum parts of our brain. The question is, that is to say that the stimuli which proceed from the cerebellum during waking life fall below the threshold of waking consciousness, the field of consciousness being entirely occupied by the cerebrum. That is the rational, logical thinking part of it. That is what our waking consciousness has all the time. Whereas whatever is happening in our cerebellum is sort of covered by it, because it is not we are not aware of what's happening in our cerebellum, and this continues till sleep supervenes, when the stimuli from the cerebellum begin in their turn to form the field of consciousness. It is not therefore correct to say that the cerebrum is the only seat of consciousness. So she says, here the question is that we have two parts of our brain. One is the cerebrum, which is our rational thinking mind, and which is where we are active most of the time. But there is this cerebellum part of it, which is more the animal component of it. And that animal brain is what we become conscious in when we sleep. The answer is quite so. The function of the cerebrum is to polish, perfect, or coordinate ideas, whereas that of the cerebellum produces conscious desires and so on. So it is our animal brain, the cerebellum. Now we come to again. So there have been so many ideas about cosmogenesis already talked about, but some more defining ones like Parabrahman and Mula Prakriti. The question really requests an explanation of the cause in the absolute of differentiation. Answer. That is outside the province of legitimate speculation. Parabrahman is not a cause, neither is there any cause that can compel it to emanate or create. Strictly speaking, Parabrahman is not even the absolute, but absoluteness. Parabrahman is not the cause, but the causality or the propelling, but not volitional power in every manifesting cause. We may have some hazy idea that there is such a thing as this eternal causeless cause or causality, but to define it is impossible. In the lectures of the Bhagavad Gita by Mr. Subbarao, it is stated that logically, even the first logos cannot cognize Parabrahman, but only Mula Prakriti, its veil. So Mula Prakriti is matter before it became matter. Before the first atom, what was the core essence of matter is called Mula Prakriti. And as per this comment, she says that even the first logos, that is the first entity, the first god that came out of the Parabrahman, even that does not know what the Parabrahman is. It only knows the covering, the matter covering, which is the Mula Prakriti, its veil. When therefore we have no idea of Mula Prakriti, the and we don't have even a clear idea of what this Mula Prakriti is. What is this matter which was not yet matter? The first basic aspect of Parabrahman, what can we know of that supreme total which is veiled by Mula Prakriti, the root of nature of Prakriti? Mula Prakriti is the root of nature of Prakriti, and that Parabrahman is veiled by Mula Prakriti. So, how can we know anything even to the Logos? So, how can we know when we don't know anything about what the covering of that Logos, which is Mula Prakriti or the root of matter? How can we know about the Parabrahman himself? Question. What is the meaning of the sentence father, mother, and son were once more one? So this comes in one of the stanzas. Father, mother, and son were once more one. Answer. It means that the three logoi, the unmanifested father, the semi-manifested mother, and the universe, which is the third logos of our philosophy, or Brahma, were during the periodical pralay once more one. That is, during pralay, all of this universe becomes one. That is what it's saying. Then differentiated essence had re-become undifferentiated. So for all the separation, the three logo, the manifested, unmanifested, and the universe, which separated, has now become undifferentiated or unseparated and become one again. Father mother is a compound term which means primordial substance or spirit matter. When from homogeneity it begins through differentiation to fall into heterogeneity, it becomes positive and negative. Thus, from the zero state or laya, it becomes active and passive instead of the latter alone. And in consequence of this differentiation, the resultant of which is evolution and subsequent universe, the sun is produced. The sun being the same universe or manifested cosmos till a new Mahapralaya. So here she's talking about how the time when the universe comes into being, there is this father-mother compound, which is spirit and matter, combination. When it is in a homogeneous state, there is no separation, there is no separate father or separate mother. It falls into heterogeneity, it becomes separated. Then it becomes positive and negative. It separates itself as positive and negative from the zero state. First, at being at a zero state, it is one, but then it goes into a positive and negative state and becomes active and passive. That is, the positive is active, negative is the passive, or father, active, mother, passive. Instead of the latter alone, instead of being just zero, it becomes plus and minus, father and mother. In consequence of this differentiation, in consequence of this separation, the sun is produced, the third is produced, that is the universe. And here she pronounces the universe with a K, the cosmos. This is the cosmos before the actual physical cosmos developed. And uh, and this goes on until the end, until a new Mahapralaya, that is until when it all will collapse and become one again. With reference to the shloka 6, where it speaks of the seven lords, since confusion is apt to arise as to the correct application of the terms, what is the distinction between Dhyan Chauhan's planetary spirits, builders, and Dhyani Buddhas? Now, actually, in Theosophy, what is said is that the one becomes two, then three, and then seven. Then the seven creators of this universe comes, and this happens at every level, at the highest cosmos level, at the level of our galaxy, and at the level of our solar system. At every level, this sort of a thing happens in space, where the builders are actually what are called the Dhyan Chauhans, the planetary spirits. These are the people who actually do the creation work. It is not the absolute, but further down the line. So the answer is as an additional two volumes of the Secret Doctrine would be required to explain all the hierarchies. In Theosophy, they say there is this huge hierarchy of beings, huge hierarchy of consciousness which is there. Just as we are higher in consciousness than an ant, there are people who are far higher than us, and even higher than that, and even higher beings of such high consciousness, they are aware of the entire universe. That is this hierarchy. So, where it's a spiritual hierarchy. So, let me start again. As an additional two volumes of Secret Doctrine would be required to explain all the hierarchies, therefore, much relating to them has been omitted from the stanzas and commentaries. A short definition may, however, be tried. So here we are talking about these higher level individuals. They are not humans at all. They are some higher level individuals. Dhyan Chauhan is a generic term for all devas or celestial beings. A planetary spirit is a ruler of a planet, a kind of finite or personal god. There is a marked difference, however, between the ruler of the sacred planets and that uh, secret planets and the rulers of a small chain of worlds like our own. Here it requires explanation. See, there are sacred planets, but Earth is not part of a sacred planet. But Earth has a chain of globes which goes together. What does this chain of globes mean? Actually, there, along with the Earth, there are other six other sort of uh, uh, what can one say, entire Earths, but in a different state. Like there is an Earth version of Earth in an astral state of two types. Wow, there is an astral state of a lower type and astral state of a higher type. Then there is a Earth's version in a lower mental plane and an Earth's version in a higher mental plane. And then there's an Earth's version in a lower mental plane. I'm sorry, I'm confusing this whole thing, but this is what is meant by a chain. A chain is all of these spaces of Earth go along with each other, and they are in different planes. There are four planes: the higher mental, the lower mental, the astral, and the physical plane. The Earth that we are aware of is only the physical plane, but along with it are these other spaces which are called globes in Theosophy, and they are also moving along with us, and we move through all these globes in our existence. So right now we are on Earth, but millions of billions of years from now we will go to other globes where we will be only in our astral body, for example, or we will be only in our lower mental body. We will not have a physical body at all. So that's how the mind, our emotions, all of it develops and makes us more and more perfect. And in the physical body, we are living only for our physical body, for our food. We do so much for just maintaining this physical body, but that is not who we are at all. We have much more inside of us, and that develops in these other realms, and in fact develops better, because obviously you don't have to take care of this physical body anymore. And that is what is a theosophic teaching on evolution. So let's go back. Dhyan Chauhan is a generic term of all devas or celestial beings. A planetary spirit is a ruler of a planet, a kind of finite or personal god. So the planet Earth also has got a planetary spirit. There is a marked difference, however, between the rulers of the sacred planets. According to Theosophy, there are sacred planets and the rulers of a small chain of worlds like us. So the planetary spirit is a ruler of all these seven globes which of Earth. It is no serious objection to say that the Earth has nevertheless six invisible companions and four different planes as every other planet. So every planet that we see has got the same sort of composition. It has got six invisible companions, and it is all these six are in four different planes. For understanding this, you can go to my chains rounds video that I have explained this part about these four planes. For the difference between them is vital in many a point. Say what one may, our Earth was never numbered among the seven sacred planets of the ancients, though in exoteric and popular astrology it stood as a substitute for a secret planet now lost to astronomy. Yet, well known to initiated specialists, nor were the sun or the moon in that number, though accepted in our day by modern astrology, for the sun is a central star and the moon a dead planet. So these seven sacred planets are not included, does not include the sun or the moon or the earth. That's what it's saying. But here the focus is on the Dhyan Chohans, which are all celestial beings, the planetary spirit, which are the rulers of a planetary chain. So here she has explained these two terms. Now we go to another topic altogether about Theosophists and praying. With the pralaya, the tribal god disappears, and Brahma and all the other devas and the gods are merged into the absolute. So, in pralaya, that is at the end, all of these so called gods, these devas actually exist, but all these other, even mind formed, the humans are forming images of gods, and all of those images, all of them go and merge into the absolute. Therefore, occultists do not worship or offer prayers to them, because if we did, we should have either to worship many gods or pray to the absolute, which having no attributes can have no ears to hear us. So either we pray to so many numerous gods or to the absolute, but the absolute cannot hear us at all because it has no attributes. The worshipper, even of many gods, must of necessity be unjust to all the other gods. You worship Krishna, those who worship Krishna do not like the ones who worship Vishnu in India itself. So, what is this? How do you choose and why do you choose? However, however far he extends his worship, it is simply impossible for him to worship each severally. I can't worship the God of the Muslims or the divinity in the Christianity and also somebody in Hinduism. It's impossible to worship so many people. And in his ignorance, if he choose out any one in particular, he may by no means select the most perfect. So he may not even select a perfect God with good attributes, with good qualities. He may not select the most perfect. Therefore, he would do better far to remember that every man has a God within, a direct ray from the absolute, the celestial ray from the one, and he has his God within, not outside of himself. This is a great, profound teaching. Let's read it again. Therefore, he would do better far to remember that every God has a God within. Every man has a God within. A a direct ray from the absolute, the celestial ray from the one, that he has his God within, not outside of himself. Every man has this celestial ray which is coming from the absolute and it is within. Now we come to this part, the astral light. What is astral light? What relationship, what relation have the astral light and akasa to memory? Answer. The former is the tablet of memory of the animal man, the latter of the spiritual ego, the dreams of the ego. As much as the acts of the physical man are all recorded, since both are actions, both are causes and producing results. Our dreams, being simply the waking state and actions of the true self, must be, of course, recorded somewhere. Read Karmic Visions in Lucifer, the descriptions of the real ego sitting as a spectator of the life of the hero. Perhaps something will strike you. So, here the difference between what is astral light and Akasha. All our daily thoughts, activities, everything that we are doing, our action, speech, etc., is recorded in the memory of nature, which is called the astral light. Okay, all that, even our dreams, all that is recorded in the astral light. But what is the Akasha? We've come to that later. What in reality is the astral light? As the esoteric philosophy teaches, the astral light is simply the dregs of Akasha or the universal ideation in its metaphysical sense. So there is this huge sort of another cloud, which is the universal cloud of not memory, but of the ideation or the ideals which this absolute wants or it does not want. But the absolute projects this idealism, which is the Akasha, the universal ideation, which exists. Though invisible, it is yet, so to speak, the phosphorescent radiation of the latter. So, this astral light is a much further watered down version of the Akasha of the universe. So, it says, even though it's invisible, so to speak, it radiates the phosphorescent radiation of the Akasha. This is the astral light, and is the medium between it and man's thought faculties. It is there, which it is these, that is the man's thought faculties, which pollute the astral light and make it what it is, and the storehouse of all humans and especially psychic iniquities. In its primordial genesis, the astral light as a radiation is quite pure, although though the though the lower it descends, approaching our terrestrial sphere, the more it differentiates and becomes, as a result, impure in its very constitution. But man helps considerably to this pollution and gives back its essence far worse than when he receives it. So, astral light is actually the memory of the entire humanity. It or everything that is on earth, for example, Earth's astral light is like a huge cloud of memory which is also moving along with Earth. And in that light, that we have polluted it tremendously with all the negative, ugly thoughts and actions and speech that we have created and have left in its memory banks, whereas actually it is what it in its core is the memory of nature, and the memory of nature at its highest is extraordinarily pure, which is the Akasha. So that is Akasha in its purest form. Now we come to another topic altogether, but it also connects with this astrolite. Can you explain to us how it is related to man and its action in dreamland? Differentiation in the physical world is infinite. Universal ideation or Mahat, if you like it, that is a universe idea of the ideas of the mind of the absolute, the universal ideation or Mahat, if you like it, sends its homogeneous radiation into the heterogeneous world. And this reaches the human or personal mind through the astral light. So the ideas of that higher absolute reaches us through this astral light. That's what it says. So if we want to know what this universe wants from us, it is there in the astral light. That is what it's hinting at. Were the personalities, lower manas or the physical mind, to be inspired and illumined solely by their higher alter egos, there would be little sin in the world, in this world. But they are not. and getting entangled in the meshes of the astral light, they separate themselves more and more from their parent egos. So all of us are, in a way, separating ourselves even more from our higher selves, from our parent egos, because we are caught up in the memory of humanity, the ugly memory of humanity, which is stored in the astral light. This is what this is saying. The astral light has been taken too literally to mean some sort of a second blue sky. This imaginary space, however, on which are impressed the countless images of all that ever was, is, and will be, is but a too sad reality. It becomes, in and for man, if at all psychic, and who's not, a tempting demon, his evil angel, and the inspirer of our worst deeds. So this astral light is should not be taken literally as a second blue sky, but it has all the images, the countless images of all the evil things that man has already done, which tempts the future man also. So it is inspires us into evil deeds. It acts on the will of even the sleeping man, though visions impressed upon his slumbering brain, which visions must not be confused with dreams, and these germs bear their fruit when he awakens. So it does not even just affect this memory of nature, does not affect just man, it affects even the sleeping man. And actually, all that we see about here about the astral light and people bringing information from about the future or the past from the astral light, all of that has the potential to be true, but how much of it is made up, how much of it is just for fake people pretending to be able to read the astral light is very debatable, because to have that ability to even read that astral light requires a high level of mental development. You have to cross certain initiations to be able to do that. So that is very suspect, or whatever we hear or see on YouTube or online about astral light. So, but we can understand this, that the past of human nature will affect the present, and that is how this astral light is affecting each human being even now. Now we come to another core teaching of higher and lower mind. And at this point, I will stop and I will request you to see the second part of this video. Thank you so much for watching so far.